This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week we interview film professionals, discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by the editing team behind A History of the World Part 2 for Hulu, and that's George Mandl, Daniel Flesher, Steph Filo, and Angel Gamboa Bryant. Just how are things going this week, guys?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
I guess my first question for you guys is, how did you guys each get involved with this project?
Well, I read about it in one of the trades very early on and contacted my agent and said, please put me down for this. I don't know what has to happen, but sign me up. And they were like, yeah, sure, we'll put your name in. And one interview led to another interview. And I don't know, I had a lot of synergy with the EPs I had worked with. Nick Kroll before. Ike Barinholtz was in the film I had worked on. And everyone just kind of really clicked in the interview, and I was very happy to have been hired, very lucky.
Were you a Mel Brooks fan before?
Oh yeah, I mean, I grew up on repeat watches of Spaceballs on VHS, and I actually saw that movie in the theater, and that was the one that kind of turned me on to Mel Brooks and his parodies, and definitely influenced my comedic sensibilities, for better or worse.
I want to jump to Angel. How did you get involved?
Well, I have a long history of working with Wanda Sykes. And so we were finishing up our season on the Upshaws, which I also have, that's where I have 2 other Emmy nominations for. And she called me and said, we're looking for another editor to jump on board on History of the World Part 2. And I was like, what? And I thought she was just kind of saying it, but then she was like, no, I'm asking you if you want to do it. And I was like, are you kidding me? I would not pass up that kind of opportunity. So I met with the team, we interviewed, and I had the fortunate opportunity of jumping on board.
Is there a particular Wanda Sykes, vehicle in this that you like? Because she's in it, she's obviously got Chisholm, but she's in it throughout. So is there a particular sketch with her that you really like?
Yeah, I mean, her Shirley Chisholm stuff is obviously incredibly well done. She's just a very talented comedian, but I think also her Harriet Tubman sketches are just absolutely hilarious. The way she plays that character, and she kind of like pops up out of nowhere constantly in different scenes, it adds a lot of comedic value.
Well, in other sketches, right? Like she's in the Civil War and
correct.
Everything. How about yourself, Steph?
Our absolutely incredible post-producer, Trish Hadley, I had worked with her in the past and we were still friends, and she kind of reached out to me at one point and was like, hey, I'm coming on board this. It's not for certain yet, but like, would you be interested once that time kind of happens in maybe interviewing or meeting with the producers? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I would kill for an interview with all of them, because I just am also a huge Mel Brooks fan. And several months had kind of passed, so I assumed maybe it wasn't happening, but the window worked out perfectly where I was finishing up on a Black Lady sketch show. They were just starting to staff up editors. And so I went in for the interview and really hit it off with the creative team. Actually, the very first editor credit I got in TV was a documentary about Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner. So it just felt like a really cool full circle moment. And then they called me the next day and offered me the position, and I was just over the moon.
So what's your favorite Mel Brooks film?
Young Frankenstein.
Okay. And finally, Daniel, how did you get involved?
I also got involved with through our post producer Trish Hadley. I've been working with her for better part of 10 years on various other shows, and she's also just a great friend. And I remember when she locked in this show, she just texted me, like just geeking out that she had landed this, and I was like, no way. I mean, I no expectation that I was gonna be involved in it. I was just really excited for her. And then one day she's like, "Hey, could you send me your resume?" And I was like, "Is it for History of the World?" She's like, "Maybe." And so I sent it off, same thing. A couple months passed. I was like, nothing gonna happen. And then yeah, like a week before my interview, they notified me like, "Hey, you should come in and do this interview." And I was like drenching sweat in the interview. I was so excited and nervous. And then also, so after I got off the interview, I worked with Ike Barinholtz's cousins on cousin on a bunch of films, and so I called him up, Adam Rifkin, and he called in a favor for me, I think, to Ike, put in a good word, which is kind of cool.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, you know, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. You know, eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art. To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them. I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
No, I guess this might be like more of an open question for everyone. I don't know if someone wants to answer it or if you want to discuss it, but like the original History of the World was done a long time ago, and a lot has occurred in the approach to editing over that time. So I think about YouTube has just sort of shifted the way we look at media and what have you. So how do you think, or did you guys take that into account, or how did you think you approached editing differently in this, or did you actually go back to the original and try to mimic certain things?
I think for me, I definitely went back and rewatched the original many times just because I love it, but also I just wanted to see, you know, if there's a way to make sure we're kind of paying homage to it. I think the world of sketch comedy has gotten much, much faster since those times. So it's kind of a matter of figuring out how to preserve that voice, but still let the jokes hit maybe harder, a little bit harder and quicker. But I think that was kind of collectively for all of us, maybe was a matter of finding what that voice was and how to honor the original at the same time as making it feel modern and fresh.
So how do you do that? How do you honor the original and still make it feel fresh?
I think a lot of that comes from the way it was written. You know, our EPs and Mel worked collectively to write all this stuff, and then they had a giant writers' room too. I couldn't take the time to name all those great writers, but you know, Mel's voice is in all of these jokes, whether or not he was the one who wrote them.
Mm-hmm.
So our job was to preserve that and try to present them in a fun, modern way. You know, but the sort of scaffolding was all there. You know, all the pieces, the ingredients were there for us to make that happen. And like Steph said, you know, comedy is faster now, and we did not make 20-minute pieces that stayed as 20-minute pieces. We took 20-minute pieces and broke them up into smaller pieces, and then interspersed them with other pieces that were smaller. You know, just were smaller, shorter. I'm not saying that very well. We had
we had longer form narrative pieces that I think were more in the tradition of Mel Brooks, like the Russian Revolution and Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's more of like typical narrative editing that you'd come to expect from his style of comedy. But then yeah, there was also like the Typhoid Marys and Galileos and all these goofy social media parodies that we use to sort of like bring the style of comedy up to date.
Now, I want to jump to the scenes that we talked about before we got started here. I guess because Angel, we haven't heard from you in a bit. Can you tell us about D-Day and why you chose that to talk about?
Yeah, so what I like about D-Day is it's sort of this like dramatic, epic sketch, right? It's a bunch of soldiers heading into a World War II battle, but then it's like layered with the constant jokes to, you know, stay true to sketch comedy. But in order to sort of like build this world, we had to like layer in all kinds of sound design of cannons and water splashing on the ship to sort of like have the believability that they were on a battleship and that it was dramatic. Obviously adding in also like music, which eventually was composed very well to bring that to life. But then the thing about the scene that's kind of like sticks out to me is that it's all of the soldiers eventually get seasick, and so they're vomiting, and you have to then layer in the sound of the vomiting, but also like try to not vomit yourself by watching this material over and over, desensitize yourself. Like sometimes I would just sit there and have to listen to it and be like, okay, I'm not going to look for a minute because I'm going to get sick. But it was a very fun scene to do, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Steph actually also worked on that scene too, so.
Oh, I was gonna say it is a very like nauseating thing. You have to like desensitize.
You're like, you guys want to get lunch? You're like, no, I'm good. In scenes like that, because there's a few sort of running gags like that where it might be, or get scenes like that where it's something that might be over the top gross or something like that. How do you draw the line in terms of pushing it too far and pulling it back?
I think everything on the show is very collaborative. So it's one of those things where if we were to put together a scene like this, we would then sit in the room. There was another scene like this that also was very gross that Dan cut. And we had to screen these scenes sort of over and over together and kind of like decide who got too grossed out and who didn't. Who, you know, at what line was it funny versus too gross? So it definitely took a lot of time and collaboration between us and the producers, a lot of screenings, so working through it.
Well, and I think the other thing that, because it's one of my wife walked in on that sketch. She's usually not a gross out person, but she thought that was hilarious. And I feel like where it got her was everyone having an excuse, trying to be manly, sort of being like, no, I ate at a bad restaurant yesterday, and it's like all these weird reasons as to why they're doing it.
Yeah, the juxtaposition it is funny. I love how you said my wife walked in on me on that. Like, so funny.
Yeah. She was just like, what is going on in here? And she like walked in. I was like, well, let me explain. I guess because you worked on this with Steph. So I guess Steph, you brought up the Freud or the Jack Black dance. I really like the Jack Black dance. I thought that was one of my favorite parts. So can you give the viewer a bit of background on that and why you chose that scene?
Yeah, well, for starters, I'm just a huge Jack Black fan. So I was kind of just fangirling out when I was, given the dailies for that. I was like, oh my God, I gotta do this, I have to do it right, because it's Jack Black. So, he's just so talented, and every single take he gave like a little bit of something like different. And so, I think I cut it several different ways, and I was working till maybe like 10 o'clock that night and totally lost track of time because I was just like so excited to be looking at Jack Black being amazing. So ultimately, I mean, I'm really happy with where we landed on it, but it was a matter of just testing out different things. There's some versions where he's like playing with the plates and singing because he's set this table. There's some versions where he's a little bit more reserved. I think we kind of went with the further him when he's at his furthest, ultimately in the end. But that was definitely just like a dream come true, cutting something with him.
What, like, when it comes to figuring out if it's working, especially with comedy, you kind of become desensitized to the jokes. So how do you know it's working, especially if you're spending that much time on it, like working to 10 p.m. on it?
I think, well, we all kind of collectively every day, would check in and have kind of a daily meeting where we look at what everyone's been cutting and kind of gave each other feedback, which was really awesome collaboratively for all of us, I think. And we all have such varied backgrounds in editorial. So, we've cut from reality, docs, drama, just everything. So it was just a cool chance to be able to collectively say like, oh, this is working, or this, if you tried this one thing, this might take it a little further, or different techniques. So it was a really, really cool experience like that.
Well, and everyone involved in this project are like at the top of their game in terms of comedy, and I feel like a lot of them would ad lib in their rushes or their dailies. But then at the same time, I think about Mel Brooks and his history, a lot of sight gags and a lot of pre-written and planned material. So was there like ad-libbing in this, or did everything sort of stick to the script?
All the scripts were incredible. They made me laugh. I read I think the whole script. There was hundreds of pages. I read it all in just a couple days. Amazing stuff. But there was, I think every sketch was very heavily improv. So it made for very beefy first edits. And you start showing it to people, you see what people are reacting to. And then throughout the process, you sort of whittle it down to what you think is the best, like 3 to 5 minute version of this, of this sketch. And sometimes our first cuts were like 10 or 15 minutes. So it was a lot to choose from.
Was there anything that ended up on the cutting room floor that you wish could go in but just didn't work?
Yes.
What would that be?
I don't think we're allowed to say.
Okay.
I have asked about this, and I think we're not supposed to talk about jokes that didn't end up in the final show, because and I think the reason is I've worked with producers in the past who do a lot of improv, and sometimes a joke falls on the cutting room floor for an episode, and then it becomes the genesis of a whole nother episode.
Oh, interesting.
Like 1 or 2 seasons later, they go, "Oh, remember that? Remember that? Okay, that that's an episode."
Oh, interesting. So there might be a History of the World Part 3, Season 3.
What did we call it? History of the World Part 2, Season 2. That's what we're teasing at the end of episode 8.
Yeah,
we're all hoping
on what to call it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll stay with you, George. You did the Curb Your Enthusiasm spoof. What tell us about it. Why you wanted to talk about that one?
Yeah, so I mean, ours was called Curb Your Judaism. It's the story of Jesus as told through Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Judas Iscariot is played by Nick Kroll, who is the Larry David character, and then we were fortunate enough to have JB Smoove come on board and play his character Luke in our world. And we tried to parody it as much as possible. We put the opening graphics, the HBO logo became GOD. We the New Testament presents, all that stuff at the beginning. And we had a nice stare down between a Roman soldier and Nick, doing the Larry David lemon face, all that stuff. And that was personally for me such a blast, because I used to work on a show called The League, which starred Nick Kroll, and that show was heavy improv. The executive producer of that show, Jeff Schaefer, is also an executive producer of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So there was all this sort of, and I talked to Nick about this, there was all this sort of meta stuff going on, where we were both feeling like, wow, this is so familiar to both of us. And, when you put Nick and JB in a room and Richard Kind, you end up with just all this gold. And, talk about improv that didn't make it into the cut. We had a ton. Our first cut of that scene was like 12 minutes long, and ended up being, at least the first part ended up being 4 minutes. And Steph, you got to do some of that too. You enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was a blast to collaborate on. It was just, and it did have a lot of like the League synergy, because I think didn't Nick like ADR'd a line at the very end of it?
Oh yeah, forever unclean.
Forever unclean, yeah.
Yeah, that is a line that was used over and over and over again by his character on The League called Ruxin.
Yeah.
I knew JB Smoove always gets me like his, I guess it's the Beatles, the sort of riff where he just refuses to do the accent was great. But he seems like a ball of energy whenever I see his his performances. So like, what were his dailies like?
They were like a wonderful stream of consciousness. Like,
Oh yeah.
you know, on both The League and Curb Your Enthusiasm, there is no script, right? They don't have any scripts. It's outlined. So they know what the beat is going to be in each scene. And in this show, we did have a script, but it was more or less thrown away. I mean, it was like once you get someone like JB involved, you're sort of just going to let him do his thing. And then we also, that sketch was directed by Alice Matthias, who also comes from an improv background and a sketch background and has done some great stuff. And she was able to throw things out for them that, like, just when I listened to them in the dailies, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, she knows what she's doing. Wasn't in that one, it was in the Beatles. She said, they were talking about giving back, and she was like, no, say give cash. So that was her idea. And then we ended up using that. And JB went off for like 10 minutes talking about giving cash. And then, we put about 30 seconds in. But
she also came up with a great improv line, which is instead of saying songs, it was psalms, Psalms. So it's very hard to hear, but throughout the Beatles sketch, they say psalms. And that was Alice's joke.
Well, Daniel, you did the JC Resurrection. So what was it about that? Or can you describe that for the viewer and why you chose that one?
Yeah, that was just a super fun sketch to cut. I'm just a big fan of like these big budget action films. So it was fun to kind of like funnel my love for that genre into this trailer. It was they originally shot it as like a longer form narrative. So there was like 5 or 6 scenes. And the first part of the process was we went through and we polished each scene to sort of get them up on their legs and make it all feel good. And then from that, I went in and made it a trailer. So originally it was more like a 5 or 6 minute short film, and then I turned it into sort of this goofy action movie trailer. So it was just kind of a fun process.
Was there a lot of freedom like that to play around with sketches, considering that you have the runtime that you have to meet, but also you're playing with Mel Brooks's baby?
There was definitely a lot of freedom. I think all of us felt that from the EPs. They were incredibly supportive of all of our ideas. We were able to throw just so many jokes and concepts out there, and they were very receptive. I think George says, like the whole team, we worked like an improv group, always yes-anding each other. So I would come up with an idea, and George would be like, "Oh, try this." Steph would be like, "Oh, try this," and so we'd always try to elevate each other's work.
And it was through the whole department too. It wasn't just the EPs. I mean, we would have our post PAs watching our editors' cuts and giving us thoughts. And if they were good, we would take them, and they usually would make things, all the better.
Yeah,
it was very, very collaborative.
Stand out for you in that?
I think for a lot of our social media sketches, one of our PAs, Angeline Rodriguez, she's a little bit younger than us, comes from the digital native generation. She was able to put in all those goofy emoji type jokes. I think she's a little bit more fluent in than us.
Now, I have one last question for you guys. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I think I said this before, but I just have to say it again. I am obsessed with the original Gossip Girl. I love it so much. I've binged it so many times. And there's actually one scene, it's like this absolutely crazy Thanksgiving dinner scene. It's not even like the end of this season. It's like just in a random episode in the middle of the season, but it has like the entire cast is there. They're all fighting with each other. There's that Jason Derulo song playing underneath for like 5 minutes straight. It just keeps repeating. And all these characters, like 2 people will be arguing and one gets up and leaves, and then the song like kicks in again, and then like 2 other people are arguing and then they get up and leave, and then the song continues. So that's definitely, and I have to shout out also the editor of that scene, Timothy Good, who also cut The Last of Us. out here killing it with Gossip Girl, The Last of Us.
How about yourself, Daniel?
I think the other editors know my answer. They've been making fun of me in this text thread, but I just love watching Michael Bay films. I think they're so fun and over the top. I think that's why they gave me the JT Resurrection sketch.
Even the Transformers.
Transformers 1, I think, is an amazing film.
How about yourself, Angel?
I'm a big Ryan Murphy fan, but also like specifically comedic horror. So he did a series a couple years ago that only went on for 2 seasons called Scream Queens
Oh
with
yeah,
Jamie Lee Curtis. It's just like I think that show is one of the most, it's just funny and well done and gross at the same time.
it's a great one.
Yeah.
And finally, George, what's yours?
You know, I don't know if this counts as guilty pleasure, but I'm going with Brady Bunch. And the reason is that I used to watch it after school. You know, when it was in like syndication at like 4 p.m. or whatever. And I hadn't watched it in like decades. And I now have young kids and they are binging it. And I'm binging it right with them because it's like there's something about it that's so comforting and it's funny. And if you look at those shows and you look at what comedy is doing today, a lot of things that we have in comedy now, you could trace back to Brady Bunch episodes. So hats off to them.
Now, did you like the movies in the 90s?
Oof. I have no memory of them. So I guess not.
Okay. And I do have one question. Did you work on Ryan Hansen Solves Crime on television? Because it's in the background.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, my wife and I love that series.
Oh, awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah, it
Sadly,
should have gotten more, but
well, it's sad that it was on one of the streamers that didn't quite make it. And the show was actually so meta in referencing YouTube Premium that
yeah,
I couldn't sell it anywhere else.
yeah. No, it was
Too
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you all for allowing me to interview today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.